Whisper Special. Making stuff and making things that we give to people.
So I've done a little dry assembly here, and I've got my clamps helping me hold everything together. And this allows me to just test my doors, and they all open with no problem at all. So this is looking pretty good. Now, if there's a little bit of a discrepancy or one of the doors doesn't sit absolutely perfect in its opening, as long as the door opens and closes, that's really all I'm probably going to worry about at this point. Because once this whole thing is together and painted, those little teeny tiny flaws just aren't really going to matter. And you'll see what I mean when the piece is done, but luckily most of mine are pretty straight, so I'm not too concerned about it. Now, before we go any further, these little doors need little baby knobs, right? It's going to be very difficult to open that door without something to grip onto. So, where's my dowel stock here? I've just got a 1/4 inch piece of dowel stock that I'm going to cut little baby handles, little baby knobs from. So we need to drill holes in our doors, and then we need to glue those in place. Cutting this dowel stock is also going to be a little bit tricky, so let me show you the whole operation. I've got a little jig that I made for cutting the dowels. Should be pretty cool. Check it out. So here's my little dowel cutting jig. Basically, it's just a scrap block of walnut. I have a 1/4 inch hole cut in it so that it goes all the way through. See, the dowel fits in there perfectly. And I've got my fence on my bandsaw set at about 7/16. That may vary depending on how far you want this to go into your door, but 7/16 works for me. Basically, I just make a cut through here like this, so I've got a nice slot, and insert my dowel. Make sure it touches the fence. And now I just push the dowel all the way through, and my little piece pops out. Nice and safe, nice clean cut. This is really a good way to do it. So now to make the recess for the handle, I've got my Forstner bit and my drill press. If you don't have a drill press, you could use a regular bit. Just make sure you don't go all the way through the material. That's really going to be your biggest issue there. I've got a mark here that's about a 1/4 inch from the edge, and my fence is set up to make sure that I plunge down pretty much at the center of my door's height. So all I really need to do is line it up with the line, and I should have a perfect location. Not going very deep either, just about 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm not going to glue these together yet. In fact, I think I may wind up dyeing these to a different color and gluing them in as a last step. But you do want to make sure that you ease the edges here. And if there's any frayed material from the bandsaw, it's a good idea to sand that away so that that edge is nice and smooth. And hey, while you're at it, there's a good opportunity to just ease the edges on all sides of the door. Now all those small parts are cut. I think it's safe at this point to start assembling the frame. Now a glue up like this can get really tricky with so many dividers and all of those doors. So what we really need to do is reduce the number of variables here. So if I can glue in some of these dividers ahead of time, that's what I'm going to try to do. We don't have to worry so much about clamping pressure and the things that we would for a full furniture project, because this is it's sort of going to be a web structure that's going to be held to a back panel, and everything is going to be immobilized that way. So as long as we get a decent bond between the divider and the base here, that should be good enough. So what I'm going to do is use the best of both worlds here. We've got a quick drying CA glue that unfortunately produces a little bit of a brittle bond between two wood pieces. So it'll work, it'll hold it in place, but I'd like a little bit more strength. And that's what I'm going to get from my Titebond glue. So this is one of those oddball sort of glue ups where I'm going to place a little bit of yellow glue right here in the middle. Just put a dab in there. Take one of my divider pieces, drop it in place, and I'm going to push it forward and back to spread that glue. Okay, then I'm going to come back and place a good bit of CA glue here at the front, little dollop in the back. I think I need a little bit more of the yellow. There we go. And now, very quickly, I'm going to get my quick set activator, spray it, drop this guy in place, put downward pressure, and make sure I'm nice and square. Now the CA glue is going to hold it in place at the front and back while the yellow glue dries. So again, this is not something I would normally do on a full-size furniture project, but on a piece like this, I think it's perfectly acceptable. And as long as everything is nice and square, we're flush in the front and the back, we are in business. Now to glue on this second level, I'm going to put a little bit of the Tip-On Extend in each slot. And I'm not too worried about the CA glue this time. And now I'm just going to drop each door in place. So the first thing I'm going to do is line up on an angle like this. Okay, so I'm on an angle this way, and I'm starting with this first one. As soon as that's in place, I can start to make sure the rest of them just pop in one at a time. There we go. Ooh, I almost made that look easy. Now, as long as I'm flush at the front here, I can push down here, we're making full contact, and then sort of push toward the back. You can see we're not fully seated back here yet. There we go. We'll even get a little squeeze out. Now, as long as this is fully seated, and you can tell by looking in the back, if you see any gaps right above those dividers, you know you're not all the way down. So I think as long as we're fully seated, we're okay. I don't think we need to really add clamping pressure here, because with a structure like this, clamping pressure could very easily cause it to collapse on itself if we put too much pressure. So I think I'll just leave well enough alone, let that glue dry. So now I'm just going to go layer by layer using the same process, starting by putting the ones in the bottom first. Once those are dry, then I drop the doors in, a little yellow glue on the dado for the top piece, and we'll build it up until we get to the top. Now I've also added an extra 5-inch tall support here right at the top, because what we need to do is start putting in filler pieces. For instance, at the top we've got a 5x5 piece that goes up here, so this just provides a little bit of back support for that. We also have all of these little spaces that need to be filled in. So use the same material that we used for the dividers. Those fit perfectly into these locations right here. So that's what I need to do now, just add a little bit of glue and pop all these little pieces in. The first thing I'm going to do though is this top 5x5 piece, because that I'm probably going to want to use a few clamps to hold that in place. So on the vertical piece. Just one more clamp at the top. And we'll just let that dry for a little bit. So with our top piece dry, I can start installing the smaller filler pieces. Just a good bead of glue on both of the rabbets. Spread it around a little. And it's not a bad idea to get a little bit of glue on that surface. There's no rabbet over here, but you know there still is contact, so certainly can't hurt to have some glue there. There we go. Now most of these should be a pretty tight fit, so you don't really need clamps here. So now I've got the entire assembly here upside down, and what I want to feel for are little dividers that might be sitting proud of the surface. Like I feel a little bit of material there. So just get my block plane and try and level that out, because that's going to interfere with the glue up that we're going to do in the next step. There we go. So now I want to glue the entire structure to this backer board that's cut to 18 by 18.5. You can see I've put a line across the bottom here at 3/4 of an inch. That's just the reference line, so I know where to place the bottom of the actual grid work. And a little bit of glue here. Okay, with the glue spread out, flip this guy over. Line it up here at the bottom. Of course, try to center it from side to side as well. And now we just need a little bit of weight on the top here. So I will start with an extra board here. And then I'll just pile anything I have in the shop that's heavy enough to weigh this down. You could also use clamps if you have a wide enough mouth that you could reach on your bench. Now with everything glued up like this, we could focus on making the two cuts that establish the A-frame. So the first thing I like to do is mark the line so I know exactly where those cuts need to be made. Now at the top of our bottom row, all the way on the side here, I'm going to measure in 5/32 from this corner right here. Basically just over 1/8 of an inch. We'll do the same thing on the other side. And now I'm going to mark a center line right here at the top. And now basically, I just connect the dots. Line it up at the top, lined up with the intersection at the bottom. Same thing on the other side. Now to make this cut, I recommend going with a circular saw and a straight edge. This way you could drop the straight edge down and just ride along the edge and create a nice clean cut. But you have to make sure you use a blade with a high number of teeth, one that's normally intended for plywood. It's kind of an awkward cut that we're doing here, so we want to make sure we get the least amount of tear out possible. The other thing you need to make sure you're doing here is we got to cut straight through this material. So whatever this is sitting on is going to get cut. So you need to have a sacrificial surface. Just a scrap piece of ply or like this MFT top is perfect for that. The last thing that I want to mention is the thickness of this back material. Depending on the size of your circular saw and how much depth you can get in terms of the cut, you may not be able to get all the way through this piece. So what I would recommend in that case, make sure you check this ahead of time, obviously, before gluing this down. You may have to use a 1/4 inch backer board on yours just to make sure that you can go all the way through. It's not too bad. Let's cut the other side now. Now I gotta tell you, I am really happy with the results of this cut. Nice and clean, especially on this plywood. That's not easy to do. So I highly recommend that plywood blade, something with a lot of teeth, and even if you buy it just for this project, I guarantee other projects in the future that have plywood, you're gonna wanna use it on those projects, and you'll have nice tear-out free cuts. Now the next step is to focus on the roof pieces here, and where they meet at the top is less than a 45-degree angle, and that could create some problems for us on our table saw and our miter saw because they only go from 0 to 45. Now, getting these angles straight and everything can be a little bit confusing, so I actually do want to go to the saw and show you why it's not going to work, and then I'll show you the setup I'm going to use to make my cut. Now, I've got a piece here that's already been cut to 26.5 degrees, which is the angle we're looking for, and that's just kind of to help me illustrate this point. If we put it into the miter saw, and I take the miter saw, normally it's at 90, take it all the way down to 45, lock it in place, and look what happens. You can see, even at its fullest extent, the blade is not going to be able to go down far enough to make that shallow angle cut. Now the same principle happens at the table saw. We can't make this cut there either with the piece laying down flat. But if we make the piece go vertical, now we have a fighting chance of actually getting that cut made. So let's head over to the table saw. Now my blade is set at 26.5 degrees, so that when I run the piece across vertically, like so, I'm going to get the exact angle I'm looking for. Now, a couple pieces of information just for the sake of safety. First of all, when you're running a piece vertically like this, we certainly can't just run our 3-inch strips that way. So you notice I've got a board that's quite a bit wider. Later, I can just rip it into 3-inch strips. So for now, this wider piece is going to be much more stable. The other thing is, of course, you want to use a feather board And if you have an auxiliary fence that's nice and tall, which by now I've done this type of thing enough times, I should really build one. Maybe we'll do that in the future. A tall fence is going to give us much more support as we push along, and we have less chance of tipping. So that's something else to consider. The final thing is the space between the blade and the fence. Ideally, we want this cut to go right up to the edge, but in order to do that, that means the fence has to pretty much come in contact with the blade. It also means that all of my support material is kind of being cut away, and I'm riding on a very fine point all the way across. That makes me a little bit nervous, so I did back my fence away by just a little bit under 1/8 of an inch. So that means when this piece runs through, I'm going to have a tiny little flat at the top, and frankly, I don't care. If it just means it's going to be safer, I don't really need a super sharp point at the top of this piece anyway. If there's a little flat there, no big deal. Now the bottom of our roof pieces is also going to get a slight angled cut. This is more for visual effect than anything else. It finishes it off nicely. But that one we can cut here at the miter saw, and it's 26.5 degrees. All right, let's see how we did. Not too bad. The pieces are a little bit warped here, but it's only 1/2 inch ply. We should be able to clamp that out, but pretty happy with that angle. Now I think I'm going to take this opportunity to glue the miter together, and this way I can be sure that it's nice and tight with no gaps. And my secret to a nice tight miter joint, packing tape. So basically I just put the inside faces down and butt the two ends against one another. I take another piece of material that I know to be pretty straight, and that way it makes sure that everything is registered nice and square and straight. Let's get a little packing tape. Keeping everything as tight as possible. Drop the tape. Maybe I'll use 2 pieces here just to be safe. Now we just carefully flip it over and put a little glue into the miter. And a couple of 23 gauge pins will help make sure nothing moves. So before attaching the roof piece, I'm going to do something you don't normally see me do on this show. I'm going to use some filler. I have a few spots like this where I've got a little gap for these outside filler pieces, so pretty much any filler is going to work for this. Doesn't really matter because it's getting painted. Color match is just not much of an issue. Although I am using something that's, labeled as birch or maple. And we want to do this now because if we wait, this is going to be a lot more difficult when the roof piece is on. And once the filler dries, just come back with some sandpaper, smooth everything out. Now the glue up here should be a piece of cake. I've got these little 1/4 inch scraps down here that will help to raise this piece a 1/4 inch off of the bench, which centers it in our roof piece, giving us a nice reveal in the front and also in the back. So all we really need to do is put some glue along the sides and then a couple of brad nails here at the bottom. I could certainly put them up the length if I wanted to, but we'll see. We'll see what it looks like as we do it. So let's go ahead and start adding the glue. Bring in the roof piece. And just making sure that I don't have any gaps on the top here. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to push in with my hip to make sure that this top center point is as far in as it's going to go. And then I can start driving a couple of these pins into the bottom piece. Now I don't know that it's 100% necessary, but I'm going to put a couple of these pins through the side here just in case. And what I'm looking for is basically this center point here. This is the center of my horizontal boards. So as long as I'm in alignment with that, I should be okay, and it should drive true into the piece below. Now on the bottom here, we're just going to need a very small filler strip to take up that gap there. This is all in the plan. And of course on the ends, I had to cut the 26.5 degree bevel. And my 23 gauge pins should hold it in place.
Next time on The Wood Whisperer.
Now I may be crazy, but what I'm going to go for here is a multi-layered faux finish. So of course we start by giving it a good mix.